Like he said, I am Julia Freeland Fisher. I am the Director of Education and Research currently at the Clayton Christensen Institute, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank that studies innovation in the public sector. And I'll get into my research in a second, but just delighted to be here. I am Zooming in from Bethesda, Maryland, and I will ask everyone's forgiveness that I have a elderly dog that just had surgery who's sitting at my feet and might make a few little animal noises. But so Mo is also a guest on this webinar, unfortunately. So anyways, just ask forgiveness in advance for that, and so delighted to be here.
And I'm David Berg. I'm Director of Technology for Big Picture Learning. And as I'll talk about, Big Picture Learning is a nationwide nonprofit that helps support school disruptive innovation particularly around things around building students' networks and social capital. And I'll be excited to show you towards the end of the webinar more information about our approach to building student connections in the real world and the tool that we've developed to enable schools to empower schools to do that work.
Awesome. So I'm just going to kick off with a quick outline of what we're hoping to go over here. I think David and I have a fairly ambitious plan, but please interrupt us with questions because we want this to fit your needs, not just let us be sort of sage on stage in this virtual environment. So I'm going to start off just giving an overview of the research that I've been pursuing over the past 3 years into why networks matter, some of the troubling data out there on unequal access to networks, particularly along some of the dimensions that Delano mentioned, at-risk students sort of being shut out of this side of the opportunity equation. And then I'm going to profile a number of the innovations that we've been documenting in the field and why we think they have promise. Among those, obviously, is some of the work coming out of Big Picture Learning and the tool that David's been building, and he'll go on to sort of share Big Picture Learning's approach overall, how big picture schools think about social capital and the assets in the communities in which they're working, how they've defined internships, and specifically sort of what InBlaze is doing to, I think, address some of the logistical and supply side barriers to internship-based learning and the great tool that David's built. Then we'll leave time for questions at the end. So a lot to go over. If that sounds good, we will dive right in. So I started the Institute about 5 years ago when we were best known for our work in online and blended learning. And I was troubled by the fact that mainstream ed reform, as most of us know, in the current accountability climate, has been focused very diligently on what students know and on test scores. And I'm not here to tell you that that is a bad thing. I think that is critical, and it's been a chronic gap that we need to address. But it's left a blind spot in its wake, which is that with everyone talking about what students do or don't know, we are ignoring and leaving to chance whom students know. And the reality is that opportunity really sits at the cross-section of these two factors. David, if you press that slide, David is animating my slides, so there's a little bit of a coordination thing happening here. And when I say opportunity, I mean a couple of things, but on the next slide, what we have is one of the more startling statistics around what this looks like, which is that that relationships are part and parcel of both getting by and getting ahead. So we actually skipped over a slide, I think. But the first indicator is that 50% of jobs come through personal connections. Now, this was a pretty staggering statistic I came across when I started this research. But if all of you sort of listening in think back to how you have accessed opportunity in the labor market, obviously networks play a big role. But it's not just that relationships matter for these sort of instrumental and labor market outcomes. On the next slide, we have a couple statistics around sort of, we keep skipping slides, around the fact that relationships are also critical for thriving as a human being. So when you say networking or relationships, a lot of people picture kind of like schmoozy cocktail hours where you're having to kind of just like network your way into your next thing. The reality is that warm relationships, which is a term psychologists use, are one of the leading predictors of health and happiness in the longest running adult development studies that we have to date. And so we really need to be paying attention not just to how are students networked into opportunity and networked into the knowledge economy, but also how are we ensuring that students are surrounded by networks of care that are part and parcel of healthy, thriving development. So this term social capital that we've used to describe this webinar is a little bit loaded, and it can mean different things to different people, and it can be frankly weaponized in the political conversation on both sides. So I want to just give you a couple definitions and the definition that we use in our research that if you're working with young people, I think is helpful. So the first comes from Robert Putnam, who's a researcher from Harvard and is best known for a book called Bowling Alone, in which he describes sort of the decline of civic life and civic engagement. And Putnam's definition, crucially, really thinks at social capital at the level of the community or the neighborhood or the town. And that's great, that's important, but it means that sometimes his measures are seen as somewhat tautological. So he'll say low levels of violence mean there's high levels of social capital, but high levels of social capital lead to lower levels of violence. The next researcher that we highlight here is named Nan Lin. He's out of Duke University. And Lin's description is a little more at the level of the individual. So I, as an individual, possess a network that has assets that I can use to get returns in the quote-unquote marketplace. This is the marketplace of jobs and also the marketplace of life, like having a neighbor who can babysit my dog, which I don't, clearly, or having a friend who can help get me a job. Now, the next definition is the one that we use in our research, and you'll see that it leans in this individual direction, because what we really wanted to pay attention to is that in the opportunity equation, we want to understand what are the social assets that young people do and don't have, and how might we design a system to continuously invest and nurture that sort of portfolio of human relationships that could help young people get by and get ahead. Now, looking at this definition is one thing, but I think if we say the word network, it's also important to appreciate the fact that different types of connections in young people's lives offer different value. And this gets really important when we start to look at the innovations that we see emerging in the field. So on the next slide, we have sort of a very cursory mental model of what makes up a network. And David, you can just sort of click through that. We encourage people to think of a network as almost a web with a dense center that gets looser and looser as it moves outwards. And sociologists refer to the connections in that inner circle as your strong ties, the people with whom you have high levels of trust, who are more likely to look out for you, to lend you money and resources, to help you out. And then you also have weak ties, what sociologists just call weak ties, and these are by definition more plentiful. We can maintain more of them at a time. They take up less of our time, less of our perhaps emotional energy. We are less likely to lend them money, but we are more likely to have weak ties that contain new and novel information and opportunities. And so that's led sociologists to coin the term the strength of weak ties, meaning strong ties are certainly strong. They're critical for our healthy development. They're critical for sort of buffering loneliness. But weak ties unto themselves offer a particular strength in that they can network us into new opportunities. And when we think about young people, sort of my experience has been the conventional wisdom has always been that strong ties are important, particularly if you're working in a school environment. You're thinking about that day in, day out. How are you ensuring that teachers and students have strong connections, that guidance counselors are forging those relationships with students? And I think that should remain critical. But one of the things we want to think about is, could we design schools to broker even stronger ties to make sure every student has access to those? And could we also design schools to actually diversify the weak ties surrounding a student? The reason this becomes important, and we'll go through this really quickly, is because of the data out there on what we would allude to as sort of relationship gaps that we're observing, particularly depending on students and young people's parental education levels, so how educated their parents are, in addition to income levels. So we'll quickly look at some of that data. You can advance the slides. So going into the next slide here, what we look at, next slide, David. What we look at first is data. This is from Pew, and this is also something that Bob Putnam, the researcher I mentioned, has looked at in a recent book called Our Kids that he came out with in 2015. But parents' own professional networks differ. Now, this is like the most obvious statement ever, but it's pretty compelling data when you look at it, that more educated parents are disproportionately networked into the knowledge economy. And if you look at where the economy is headed, where automation is more likely to sort of erode the supply of jobs, these connections will sort of be potentially increasingly important in the future, right? So more educated parents know twice the number of professors, CEOs, congresspeople. In the next slide, we also look at the fact that there's a troubling gap beyond the school building and beyond sort of families networks around enrichment spending. And this is actually not even the most up-to-date data. There's more up-to-date data from Sean Reardon at Stanford showing that this gap between income quintiles, so the top income quintile and the bottom income quintile, has radically grown in the years in terms of what families are putting towards enrichment spending. Now, that in of itself could tell us about sort of what sorts of learning experiences students are getting access to, but it helps explain on the next slide some pretty alarming data around access to informal mentors. Now, informal mentor term of art out of the mentoring world, when sort of people started to acclimate to the fact that it's not just about expanding formal mentoring programs like Big Brothers Big Sisters, where you assign a student a mentor. In fact, mentorship is a naturally occurring phenomenon out in the world. And we want to pay attention to, do students have equal access to those naturally occurring relationships? And as you can see here, there's pretty significant gaps in terms of any non-family member adults in students' lives. So whereas kinship networks, you actually see a fair amount of equal access. When you move beyond those into the realm of teachers or coaches or family friends, suddenly you have less equal access. Sorry, the colors got messed up on this slide, but you get the gist. So all of those should be troubling to us, not only when we think about that statistic that half of jobs come through personal connection. So not only when we think all the way down the line to how this matters in terms of access to opportunity, but also because there's a fair amount of research, and I'd point you to the Search Institute as one of the most reliable sort of hubs of this data. Really compelling research that access to these relationships drive the sorts of outcomes we care about in schools today. They drive motivation and engagement. They drive grades. They drive whether students pursue particular career paths based on early exposure to careers. And so all of these, I think, become part of the equation when we're thinking about how do we level that playing field that Delano was talking about. Now, what I want to pivot to is that there's some good news, which is that there's a number of innovations on the horizon that we're starting to see. And these innovations fall into a couple of buckets. What I'm going to focus on today, particularly because of the tool that David's going to share in the second half of the webinar, is where technology actually has a play to make here. Now, that feels like a funny question to ask in 2018. I don't know if anyone saw the latest Common Sense Media report that came out last week, but basically, like, students are going online in droves. They are like living in social media. So the idea that we would sort of celebrate technology as a solution to these gaps that sort of have persisted and grown since social media hit is a sort of funny question. But when we took a step back and we said, well, is Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram going to solve these gaps? The answer is a resounding no. And that's because, as we sort of explain on the next slide, David, those tools have been very helpful in expediting how we maintain connections. They are disrupting what we would call the decay rate of a friendship, meaning you are probably in touch with people right now that you should not be in touch with, right? Like you know what your first grade classmate from 25 years ago ate for lunch. It's totally absurd. But we're not necessarily using these tools to diversify our networks in ways that would actually make a dent in opportunity gaps. One quick statistic that really gets at this point, I'd ask you to guess how many Facebook friends know each other in real life. And that's on the next slide. So think about it. I usually hear something between 5 and 80%. The actual answer is 93%, meaning that people have really used Facebook to digitize their offline lives, not to reach new people. And you don't have to just trust me on this. This is a statistic from 2011, so you might think this is changing. But in 2017, Mark Zuckerberg, in one of his many posts on his own wall, pontificating and philosophizing about where the world was headed, sort of admitted that he had never built Facebook with this in mind, right? Facebook has algorithms that are constantly trying to surface people you already know, but it's not been designed to tackle, to provide inroads to new connections. Make sense? So with this in mind, we set out to look at, well, what are the tools that are doing this? And luckily, there's actually an emerging marketplace of ed tech that is aimed at solving this problem. And I'm not going to belabor the details of this, but if we go on to the next slide, there's basically 3 main strands of the ed tech market where we're starting to see relationship expanding tools take root. And these tools range from access to online mentors for college guidance, access to industry experts for project-based and sort of relevant work-based learning, and access to academic support and encouragement. What I want to emphasize here is two things. The first is that obviously these are slices of these portions of the edtech market. So there are all sorts of college guidance tools that are relationship deserts, that are in fact trying to digitize away relationships by using things like chatbots or just sort of better access to more on-demand information. Those aren't the tools that I'm excited about when we think about these social capital gaps and the difference that a network can make in a student's life. What we wanted to look at were what are tools that are putting new relationships within reach. The other thing I want to emphasize, and I'll use Granny Cloud as a great example of this. Granny Cloud is an effort of Sugata Mitra, who's well known for his work in the slums of India, where formal education was not on offer for students. And he created what's literally known as sort of the hole in the wall. He put a computer in a hole in a wall and saw what students could do just through informal learning. And he saw great results, but he also saw that students' enthusiasm or engagement would flag. And he wanted a way to help them re-engage, knowing that he didn't have access to formal teachers. And what he created is this tool called Granny Cloud, which Skypes in caring adults, originally old lady caring adults. It's now everything from 24-year-old men all the way up to old women. Caring adults who could sort of nudge students along and just provide care and encouragement. So it's not a tutoring platform, it's just an academic encouragement platform. That yielded amazing results. Now, what I want to say about that is, on the one hand, it shows how many of these tools are supplementing traditional teacher and counselor roles, not replacing them. So that's not really that's not sort of the end game here, is to replace these traditional roles in schools. But the other thing I want to emphasize is that an online granny is not the same thing as a grandmother. And this is sort of where I think it's important to keep technology in its place. These tools compete in their competitive advantage to offer weak ties, where those relationships are otherwise not on offer. They are not going to be the tools that shore up strong tie gaps in students' lives. And David can speak more to that, but I think that oftentimes we get excited in education about technology as a silver bullet, and we try and cram it in to solve problems that it wasn't designed to solve. Our big thesis in our research and in the book we just came out with is technology has a competitive advantage to disrupt the limitations of your weak tie network, to put new weak ties within reach, but it's not necessarily the tool, at least these online connections are not the tools that are going to shore up students' strong ties. They're carrying networks of webs of adults. So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing I want to talk about, and this is how we'll pivot into sort of what David has been building, is as we looked at this market, a different species of technology tool also started to emerge. And this is, pardon the sort of postmodern metaphor, but this is essentially tools that are starting to Uberize social capital, meaning unlocking latent supply for in-person connections. So not online connections, but in-person connections. And if you go to the next slide, David, we'll just look at, oh, sorry, you can just click through there. So there are emerging platforms to curate local connections. So these platforms are not saying we need an online granny from England to port into the Indian slums, or we need an online mentor from New York to talk to students in rural Texas. These are platforms saying we know that we have local assets that we are not tapping into, and technology could help to address the logistical barriers of identifying those assets, curating them, and coordinating them. And so InBlaze you'll hear about, but a couple others on this list that just bear calling out. Community Share is a platform out of Tucson, Arizona that functions sort of like a Craigslist for teachers, where teachers can go on and find guest speakers that they could bring into their classrooms. And just to put a point on this sort of technology to go online to then go offline, that's what the founder really of Community Share really talks about, going online to then form offline connections. So it's a different use case of technology. A couple of these other platforms, Nepris is a marketplace of industry experts who's been asked to white label in a number of geographies doing workforce development and wanting to coordinate sort of students' access to networks in those geographies. So that is a super quick synthesis of where we're seeing technology sort of blossom in this space. And what I'd argue is that it's starting to open the door to moving from this kind of simplistic model I have here of a fairly insular model of school that we've long experienced and that many of us experienced growing up, to, if you click next, David, to a much more integrated model where suddenly students are accessing a whole range of both in-school and out-of-school relationships in a way that could start to put a dent in social capital gaps and start to expand opportunities for more students. So the next slide, this is a shameless plug for the book I just wrote. You don't have to buy it. But the good thing actually is that we have a free tool that you can use right now, which is at whoyouknow.org. We've shared sort of the entire market of any tool that we've found, and obviously it's not complete, that puts a new relationship within reach for students, and really giving, hopefully, program folks and folks in schools like you guys a chance to understand what's starting to crop up in this, I think, arguably really exciting space. So I'll hand it over to David, and we'll do Q&A at the end, and also email me offline if that was a confusing and cursory treatment of a really complex topic.
Wow, amazing, 25 minutes, nice job. All right, so hello again, everybody. I'm David Berg. As I mentioned, I'm Director of Technology for Big Picture. We should talk a little bit just briefly about what our organization does to give some context. Our mission is to activate the potential of school systems and education through student-driven real-world learning. And so if you look at the bottom two lines of that, through student-driven real-world learning, we have a whole nonprofit that's built around this idea of connecting kids with relationships and developing relationships out in the real world. We've been around for a while. 24 years, we're almost up to 25 years. Big Picture Learning is not a CMO. We don't own or operate schools. We're a nonprofit that provides coaching services and affiliation and conferences and support for schools, for districts, and for regional players in redesigning school, in part to help students build social capital. We've been doing it for 24 years. We have 60 affiliated schools in the US and hundreds overseas as well. Carlos Moreno is our co-executive director, and he likes to say that demography doesn't have to be destiny. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to work on here. If we take this example, and Julie was talking extensively around what is social capital, it's a little bit of a graphic of it that I like. The green one in the center, the green circle, that's the student. In this network, the student might know a mechanic, a doctor, an artist, and then this other student over here might have a different network. Arguably, I mean, it's different in size, but it's also different in the types of connections as they have. So there may be scientists and lawyers and doctors. Now, if this kid is interested, on the left side, is interested in working in a mechanic, they have those networks embedded in their community. And so they're able to find that connection, say to their uncle, hey, you're a mechanic, can I talk to you about your work? But if this kid is, and this kid on the right-hand side, if they want to pursue a doctor, they can do that, but they also could talk to their uncle who's a doctor and say, hey, do you know anybody who's an engineer? And they might connect that student with an engineer. So there's that extra layer, maybe that weaker tie, as Julia talks about. If the student on the left, though, is interested in being a scientist, it's harder for them to get there. It's harder for them to find that connection, to build that connection, to develop that relationship. Okay, and that's a really compelling opportunity for schools, because schools can come in and broker those relationships. They could be they could be the knowledge or the social capital marketplace. So if we look at this example now, that student who is interested in following and finding an engineer can talk to somebody at their school who could talk to somebody at the student on the right side here and really start to build that connection. And we could even go up a level to a district level where a region or a district can play a part in distributing and helping to distribute social capital in a way that's more equitable. And really, in some profound ways, shift the way the trajectory of people's lives and provide opportunities. And we're not just talking about finding opportunities for disenfranchised youth or youth that live in poverty. Like this is a pretty diverse thing. If a kid is raised in an affluent community, they may find challenge in finding someone who's a tradesman, who's someone who's working in the trades. And so schools have an opportunity to go both ways with that. But they need tools for that. So Big Picture Learning, about 4 years ago, decided that we were getting a lot of demand on schools and organizations coming to us and saying, but how do you do the internship piece? Just tell us about the internship piece. And we felt as a mission-driven nonprofit that it was a real opportunity for us to scale impact if we could provide a tool that enabled schools to implement the nuts and bolts of an internship. Because the reality is that internships are hard and messy. You're actually, as that graphic that Julia showed, you're shifting the boundaries of school. So students are leaving school, physically leaving school, and that presents some logistical challenges. Plus, there's the challenge of how do you curate as a school the hundreds or perhaps thousands of relationships that you're trying to cultivate within the community. And schools are really well situated to do that work because they're embedded in the community. You've got parents and students rotating through, teachers who are in the community. So schools are an ideal place to build that network, but there weren't clear tools to enable schools to curate and cultivate those relationships. So about 4 years ago, we started down the path, and with some generous support of the New Profit Foundation, which is the sponsor of this webinar, we started building Emblaze. We now, at this point, we're out in 45 schools around the US and Canada, and we have about 10,500 students on the platform right now today. And there are about 14,000, 15,000 potential or filled internships on the platform. And about 3 weeks ago, we logged 51,000 internship days on the attendance functionality of the platform. And what that means is 51,000 student days where students were not on campus learning, they were out in the world learning and building their social capital and professional networks. So we're really proud of that impact that we're already showing. It's important to note, though, that when we built this platform, we built it from the lens of big picture learning and what we mean by internships, and particularly high quality internships. The word internship is becoming ever present in education, and it means very different things to different people. So we thought it's important to really state what we mean by the word internships. So for big picture learning, we believe that high quality internships are student driven. And you'll really see that in the reflection of Emblaze, of the platform that we've built. Students are not assigned internships in Emblaze. Students search for internships based on their interests, and they're really empowered just to be curious and to try to develop relationships. And they're also even empowered to help build the network of the school, where they can actually bring those connections that they have in their community into the school's network. And so student-driven internships, as opposed to assigned or imposed internships, tend to have higher outcomes. Kids engaged, kids are interested in this work. The mentor then gets the sense of that the student is interested in them, and the outcomes are higher. High-quality internships can be a key to student engagement. If students are not engaged in the comprehensive high school model, per se, having them have more, having them have more comprehensive high school may not be the answer, okay? Getting them out into the real world, making their learning authentic in the real world can be a real reset for students. It's about the relationships for high quality internships. We think that it's really important for students to develop, as Julia was saying, really those strong ties. Develop that. I mean, develop strong ties and weak ties, but really think about those as all relationships and be able to work through those and develop those. And that's a really key piece to building the social capital. We also think that internships are a collaboration. The best internships, while after-school internship programs are great, we also love the idea of internships being part of school because, as you'll see, like we think they're valuable learning that happens there. And so therefore, that's a new and emerging role for the teacher, is how do you become the arbiter of the education that's going on at the internship, of what the learning that's taking place at this internship. And that takes a collaboration with the mentor and with the student. I have been an advisor at a big picture school and have been an internship coordinator at a big picture school. And I would have students teaching me things. I'm an earth science teacher by trade. And I had a student in Sacramento who was interning at Sac State in the geology department. And this student was a junior at that time. And I'd walk into that lab, that research lab, and the student would be teaching me things about geology because of that collaboration that we did with that mentor, with that student. We also think that high quality internships are an important way to fight inequity, and that's everything that Julia was just talking about, so I'll go through that one quickly. We think that internships are academic, that students can do deep academic work at their internship. And lastly, our work in building Emblaze is really trying to disrupt the education model so that internships or real world authentic learning is a right, that all students have the opportunity to build connections in the community as part of their time in school. So with that, we built Emblaze. Emblaze empowers student agency, so students could search internships based on their interests. And I'll show you that we're searching a curated set of data from a school. We don't At Big Picture Learning, we don't scrape the internet for all the internships in the world and provide that data to students. We really want the school to develop and nurture and prosper on the connections that they already have embedded in their community. And Blaze, though, does handle a lot of those really difficult nuts and bolts things like attendance. Like, how do you know your kids are showing up at internships? These are the things that make a principal's shoulders lower and then relax. Like, okay, we can do this because there's a way to know if the kids are showing up. And also, we need a way to really, technology could be really helpful in automating and building efficiencies in the communication with the school, the student, and the mentor. So it helps with that process. And then automation of teacher and coordinator oversight. When I was in Sacramento with my colleague Andrew Frischman, who's now co-executive director of Big Picture as well, he was the internship coordinator there, and he cultivated a database of around 3,000 internships. He cultivated those on an Excel spreadsheet. And so you can imagine when a student's interested in an internship, the spreadsheet gets emailed around, and then it gets to get updated, and then the update has to transfer through emails back and forth. And there's really quick progression to poor data quality and real opportunity for opportunity. There's real chance for things to go slowly and for errors to happen along the way. Okay, so with that, I'll point out quickly that Emblaze, as it currently exists today, has login experience for students, advisor, teacher, internship coordinator, and mentor. The internship coordinator is really the admin for the platform, so they curate and cultivate the data set for a school. And there could be multiple internship coordinators at a school, just like there's multiple teachers or students for that matter. And the mentor also logs in to confirm attendance. Because we've been really focused on student engagement, we also have built mobile native Android and iOS apps for students. This whole idea of getting out, of leaving to learn, is inherently a mobile app. Students are moving out in the real world, so it's natural that we have mobile apps for them. And so let me quickly go over and show you what the platform looks like today. And I want to make sure that I'm doing all right on time here. So I'm actually going to switch my screen share over to my phone so that you can see what a student sees. Let's make sure this is going to come up here. I'm sorry, I'm just working on the real estate of my little laptop here. There we go. Oops. Hold on one second. There we go. Julia, do you all see my phone right now? If you could just do a tech check for me here.
Yep.
All right, great. So if I open up the Emblaze app right now, the first thing that a student will see, this is again a student experience. The first thing that a student will see is that there's a feed of notifications. So these are the moments where a student has requested to pursue an internship or requested to start an internship, and they get a notification back about that. But we also see that there's a social feed here. We want kids to see that this is a normative thing in the community and the culture of the school. The kids are getting out at internships. Also, we want there to be a bit of a marketplace here where kids can share opportunities with their friends, teachers could share opportunities with students, hey, check out this internship, and so forth and so on. On the bottom there, you notice that there's a search button. So if I click that, you'll see that there are 22 internships in this curated data set. This is a one school's curated data set. In a sense, it's intentionally siloed. We want the school to own these relationships. And so, so this student has 22 opportunities to search for. They could search based on profession or keyword. And if I just show you all of them, we see this is a card view. So these are all the different opportunities that are available for this student. Each one of these represents one opportunity for one student with one mentor. So if we go in here, you can see there could be multiple cards that are at the same business, but we try to drive practice to schools around, we'll identify who's the mentor at that internship for the first internship and who's the mentor at the second internship, because they probably do different jobs and they probably have, they probably offer different opportunities for learning for that student. And so if we look also on the bottom right, you'll see there's a little map icon. And so we zoom in there so students can see internships based on their location. Normally it zooms into the geographic area, but in my data set, I have an internship scattered all over. And so we normally zoom in so kids can see what are the opportunities near me. Again, as Julia was saying, like this tool is really about getting offline, getting out there in the real world. So it's helpful to know what are the internships that are near me. So if I go back here and let's find one that's interesting to me. Let's see, we'll go into this one here. So this is a construction internship. Schools come up with their own naming conventions around these about what they are. And so who could be limited by them, like maybe it's for 17 and over. We see that there's the profession of the mentor, but also the business types, so students can see both of those. There's a share icon on the top right where kids can share the opportunities with their friends. And the description where schools can curate like what the credits are earned for this internship. Kids could also click into the map to see, well, if I were to get this internship, how would I, oops, sorry, I'm in an airport Wi-Fi right now, but it would normally zoom in and it would show you how you would get to this internship.
David, there's a question. Can I ask it on their behalf?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Anya Smith-Roman asked, can students only access this app if their school is participating? As in, could a student who learns about this opportunity from a friend at another school, could they then log on and utilize this tool even if they aren't at the original school?
Only if the student shares their login credentials. So it's a good question. And so we really want to emphasize that this is a distinguisher for a program for a school, and we're not. We want to make sure we celebrate these efforts by the school. And by the way, I should say that several of the organizations that use Emblaze are not schools. They're after school or local nonprofits that are doing work-based learning experiences. Some even use them for paid internships where they can track hours. I'll show you the attendance piece. But it is something for a particular school. Good question. So we see here, the other piece that I'll go through quickly here is that students can see previous interns. So we want students to see that there is a long-term institutional memory and institutional connection between the school and this potential mentor out in the community. Other kids have been here before, so there could be a bit of a homophilia of like, oh, that kid's like me, I want to try that internship too. Or I should go down the hall and talk to that senior about that internship. The giant request to pursue button down at the bottom, that's where a student is saying, I'd like to try to pursue this opportunity. I want to point out here, what we're doing at this point is telling the internship coordinator that this, as a student, I'm saying, I'm interested in this opportunity. I'm interested in trying to land an internship here. Emblaze does not automatically, technologically make an internship happen. We actually really want kids to learn how to advocate for themselves, to do their own elevator pitch, to build a LinkedIn profile, and to build connections with mentors. And that's scaffolded and supported by their teachers. So this is just the student saying that I'm interested in this opportunity. I like trucks. And then them requesting to pursue it. So you see here right away, the internship coordinator gets this notification right away. So we get really quick turnaround in this information. The internship coordinator can approve this, in which case they get a push notification telling them they're approved to pursue it. So some of the other pieces here is one is on the bottom of the opportunities. Students can see their existing internships, the internships that they have right now. This kid happens to have 3. So this kid has 3 internships. I can look at my schedule for my internship, see when I'm supposed to be there. If I'm running late for the day, I can look at the mentor information and give the mentor a call, just click in and say, hey, I'm running late. Notice there that the email address, I'm just gonna point out for the mentor is my email address also. So right now I'm playing the part of the student, but in a second, I'm gonna show you what a mentor sees via the email. And so I could see all that information. If I go back out here, I can also see my attendance. I can see past internships and all that stuff too. If I wanna do attendance, 5 minutes before an internship is scheduled to start, I would get a push notification reminding me to check in. 5 minutes before it's supposed to end, I'd get a push notification reminding me to check out. Start of the day, I want to check in. I say, this is my internship. You notice that I live out in Puget Sound and I'm at the SeaTac airport right now. And so it's showing here that I'm pretty far from my internship today. So I'm checking in. Emblaze, just so you know, doesn't track student location. It only pings the GPS the moment the kid checks in and the moment the kid checks out. And students can disable location services on any mobile device.
David, since we're talking about checking in and checking out, there was sort of a macro question, and we can pivot to this at the end if you want, but are there issues with equity and access due to transportation issues was the question.
Yeah. So those are really important design questions that I'd love to chat about towards the end because that is absolutely an important case around school design and coming up with community solutions to some of those challenges that I'd love to talk about. So is your mentor present? So just think about like the data that you're able to gather on a daily basis about what kids are doing at their internships. What are the goals today to fix the airplane? Anything else you want to share? I'm going to say nope for now. And so now I've just checked in. And so I could go about starting my day, okay? At the end of the day, I can go and check out. I'll go to the same card here, say I want to check out. What did you accomplish today? Fixed airplane. And some schools that I see set very specific expectations around what students record for their goals and accomplishments. We're also really excited to be starting to look at some of the larger impacts of work-based learning based on the data we're able to collect from the mobile app and students logging in and out every day. Anything else you want to share? I love my internship. Give my fat thumbs. I could duck time for lunch if I want to. Some schools are really in their design of their internship program, expect kids to say, like, you have to get 120 hours to earn these credits. And so we enable schools to be really precise with that. Click submit. And so now I checked in and I checked out. School, by the way, could see all this stuff live. So the school, the teacher, or the internship coordinator could see kids checking in and see kids checking out. Now, the other thing that just happened is because I checked out, the mentor at the internship site has also just gotten an email asking them to confirm the student's attendance for today. And so what I'm actually going to do is go back to this screen for a second and just quickly pull up my email. And you'll see in my email, if I refresh this page, that I just got an email. Oh, let's see if it's going to work here. Here we go. You can do it. You can do it. Come on, Gmail, do it. There we go. So I just got an email from the student. Remember, now I'm taking the role of the mentor at the worksite. So if I click onto this email here, I say, Dear Morris Mechanic, that's me, that's the mentor. Please review and approve or deny the student's timesheet for today. I click review here, and it's really easy for the mentor. They can quickly go, yeah, this time is correct, this time is correct, and they can write comments. David is great. And they don't have to, though. They can just hit submit. They have their advisor's email address here, too. If they want to email them, they can click into that. They can decide to share this with the student if they want, and click submit. And the last thing I love showing about this is that if a student has a LinkedIn profile that is associated with their Emblaze account, Emblaze prompts the mentors to endorse the kid on LinkedIn. We have this radical idea that if kids are out there in the real world, building social capital in the real world with local community experts, they should be assessed for that in something that transcends a transcript, that goes on beyond that, that's out there in the real world, that's public. And so we're trying to drive practice around getting mentors for students to build LinkedIn profiles early, and for mentors to start helping the student build their online professional network. There's a bunch of other stuff I could show you. Well, I'll quickly show you one other thing, which is this is the teacher view. And if I go to attendance here for the day, I could see down here that I have one student that checked in today, which was me as the teacher. I have to move some of the Zoom windows around here to make room. And I see that the student here was checked in. The mentor approved it. The check-in was late, though, because this internship is late. And the mentor confirmed this, but the checkout was early. I could go into the details here. I see the mentor left comments. And I could see as a teacher now, well, where was the kid when they checked in? Ooh, they were kind of far from their internship today. Where were they? Oh, what's up with that? And I could see what the goals were today, the comments that the student left, the accomplishments and the comments, and I also see the mentor's comments, and I also see that the student was far from their internship at the end of the day. So with that, let me go back to here again. All right, so we're at the point with questions, and what I could show more of the tech platform, but typically my experience is that we move towards design questions, like the one that was just proffered around, so how do you handle transportation? And I wanna make sure that we give ample space for that. And then if you do have other tech questions about how Emblaze works, I'm happy to schedule demos with folks at a later time where we can go in deep and show you the compliance functionality of the platform, or the internship coordinator and how they curate data and all the other things that the platform does. I also want to make sure that we loop back around and let Julia kind of wrap things up with anything she'd like to close with. Okay, so Julia, you were starting to curate the questions here. Let's see.
Yeah, David, so there's one more question. It's a little technical, but I actually think you can zoom out and make some design points, which is what's the student feedback been on using this app and web browser, or using the app/web browser, and then also what happens if a student forgets to check in?
Yeah, so, okay, there are two questions there. So the first question is around implementation and change management. As a general rule, if you've been doing an internship program since freshman year, which is pretty rare, it's what big picture schools do, but it's pretty rare. And when kids hit senior year, you roll out Emblaze, a new product and a way to do attendance. The seniors tend to be like, yeah, we're not gonna do that. But I have found that when this becomes part of a school's internship program, everybody relaxes. It's like, okay, this is something that's scary. Our kids are getting out into the real world. These kids are actually scared of that, getting out into the real world. Parents have concerns around it. The mentors have concerns around it. And so when they see that there's a tool to support this, it really adds a bit of legitimacy to the efforts to do this work. And so generally I find that students are easy adopters of the platform, particularly because of the mobile apps, particularly because it's very easy for them to log attendance. Now, the kids forget. So kids will forget to log attendance. We're experimenting with ideas about some other notifications, but we can't really attach electrodes to kids' heads and say, make sure you do your attendance, or they get a shock or something. Like, they might forget to do attendance. And if that's the case, the teacher can always add time or adjust time on the attendance, because the student's not the fiduciary of their own attendance, nor is the mentor. The teacher is the fiduciary of attendance for all schools that I know about. And so we enable teachers to go in and look at the times that the students have recorded and adjust them as needed, or add a new time completely if they forgot completely. Other questions? I hope I answered that one.
So that's it in terms of questions. So maybe we loop back to the transportation one, and I can chime in on that as well. And then if people have any lingering questions, we still have 12 minutes left.
Yeah. So I've seen internship programs thrive in rural communities. We have big picture schools in rural communities and in urban communities. And there are different challenges that present themselves. I have seen in a rural community, a school get a donation of a van, and they will shuffle kids around. They'll do a combination of, some kids have their own transportation, some parents will help shuttle kids around to internships, and sometimes kids hop in the van. And sometimes there is some other public transit opportunities in that rural area. In urban areas, we have much more public transit infrastructure, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking. And so kids generally get around through that. And, the process of an internship coordinator approving a kid, or the teacher approving the start of an internship, should contain a conversation around what resources do you have available to get to this internship? And if you don't, what are the resources that we could provide for you? And so I've seen things like community carpool things that happen in an urban school as well, where we have, where parents shuffles kids around as well. So there are a variety of different ways to handle that. There's not one technological fix that solves it for every community and every school.
So I'll just zoom out on this question to look sort of more broadly at what we're seeing in the space, because I think obviously Big Picture Learning has 3 decades of expertise in how to kind of get this right if you're going full-fledged internship-based learning model. But I do think that there's other things to bear in mind sort of beyond just internship can be a stand-in for all sorts of out-of-school learning opportunities, and all sorts of opportunities where you could actually play with dosage, right? So if you're struggling with transportation issues, porting experts into your classroom may actually be your best option, right? And that still gives students some of the real world connections that we're talking about without breaking the bank. Another thing that's sort of starting to emerge is companies like Hop, Skip, Drive, which are essentially Uber. I keep using this analogy today. I actually don't even use Uber, I use Lyft, but Lyft for young people, and they're starting to contract with schools, particularly serving foster youth and homeless children because of some recent federal legislation around that. But there are players starting to emerge to try and tackle some of these transportation struggles. So I think I'd point to both like innovations that expand access using online connections, and also some of the new infrastructure players that are starting to crop up, particularly where transportation has been a struggle historically.
And I want to emphasize what Julie was just saying by way of example. I was part of a school in Issaquah, Washington that just opened up that's really cool and awesome, called Gibson Neck High School. And they redesigned a big portion of this campus when they opened the school to really make it a place for mentors to do work, almost like a residency. And so and by mentors, I mean, it could be retirees, it could be artists who are looking for a space. And so these internships can be anywhere, and the real world does include within the school walls. And so it enables them to be really personalized in their approach to building real world connections. That requires, some infrastructure changes, like you need a space for mentors to be on campus, but it could be a really empowering way to bring the community in.
David, there's another question for you here. How many schools are you currently in, and what are your growth aspirations? What types of schools and students are you targeting?
Yeah, so we have about 60 schools right now that we're in various stages of implementation. So around 40 schools that are using it today. We have about 20 more schools that we're starting the school year, so we're implementing with them right now. Our growth plan is to keep growing. And, we are a nonprofit, so we're essentially an edtech startup that's embedded in a nonprofit. So all of our work is really a balancing act of spreading and scaling, but making sure that we're spreading and scaling not just in getting this tool out there, but also continuing our impact play on building social capital. And I'll say that Emblaze, if it was out there as just a tool without any sort of reference point towards mission, could be a tool that really enables affluent kids to continue to build social capital really more easily, and it could continue to spread the opportunity divide. And so we as a nonprofit are really laser focused on that guiding principle of making sure that we're building social capital in a way that's equitable. And so do we choose some schools more than others? We don't yet. We don't say, we don't say no to anybody, but we are definitely looking at the data and making sure that we are a tool that's out there that's available for instance, for kids who are in less affluent communities to be able to build, or more restrictive networks for them to build social capital.
And so related question to that, David, what steps have to be taken to start using Emblaze at a school or organization? What's the on-ramp?
Yeah, so the on-ramp is, let's see if I have another slide here with our names and email addresses. No, I'll have to go on the beginning, but I'll go all the way back to the beginning slide, but email us, and my email address is david@bigpicturelearning.org, or you can go to emblaze.org, IMBLAZE, emblaze.org, and those are great places, and I imagine through this webinar with New Profit, we can get everybody's email address, so we're happy to send a follow-up about next steps if you're interested in learning more. And we're happy to get connected with you and do a more detailed demo and talk to you more about the work that we do in general at Big Picture Learning and show you the platform.
Yeah, I'll just say, send more questions if you have them, but I'll say from my perspective, I'm a researcher, so I don't endorse single tools, but we talk about Emblaze in the book we just came out with, and it's for a particular reason, which is that I think that it's a really wise way to design something that could be adopted by a very open school model that's optimizing for work-based learning, that's optimizing for social capital, but it's also a tool that can fit into a fairly traditional school model that's just getting off the ground and trying to sort of architect their way to a more open model. And I just think that having something that's flexible for both schools that are way out there on the redesign curve and schools that may look more traditional is really exciting, particularly if we're going to use tools like these to address opportunity gaps. And so I think it's been designed very thoughtfully for those two very different, seemingly different customer bases.
And I'll also say, as a mission-driven nonprofit, we are very interested in knowing the other products that are out there. So I'll flip that over and say, we're really excited to work with Julia and Christensen Institute because it provides a lot of insight for our schools and for our mission-driven work. And examples of Nepris is a great platform. And so there are a lot of other tools out there, and we are always interested in knowing if there are other tools out there in the landscape that do the work that Emblaze does. We love Emblaze, we built it, we're really proud of it, but we also want to know what else is out there because more than our love for a tech product is our love for this mission and the work that we do.
Okay, one last question. How have you found the mentors to be in terms of commitment to the opportunities they provide? And do you find there are some mentors who don't really, quote unquote, get it when it comes to providing internships that are maximizing the learner's time?
Yeah, one of the slides I showed around high quality internships is that it's a collaboration. And that puts some responsibility on the school about setting up clearly what the opportunity is for everybody, because there's opportunity here for everybody. And you can't necessarily expect mentors out of the gate to know how to interact with teenagers, for instance, as an example. I wouldn't underestimate them in any way. And I'd also say that they can have them right out of the gate, can have the more compelling and deeper interactions and more educational interactions than a teacher can, in fact. And that's a radical idea, but I think that I've seen that as a teacher. And so that takes school design work around setting expectations around what a teacher does who is helping to collaborate and build relationships with the community. It's the supports that they need. So what is your internship program? What is the mission of your internship program? What is the expectation of it? Really coming up with documentation to explain what that is. And then, the whole process is really integral to building that relationship in a way that's staged so that the mentor feels like they're being included and they're not being overwhelmed. We typically at a Big Picture School do first, when a student's approved to pursue a site, they first try to do an informational interview. That's a very low commitment for a mentor. Calling the mentor up and say, hey, would you like to spend an hour or 20 minutes even on the phone with the student and just talk about the work that you do and have them ask you some questions. Very low commitment. What also has happened there is that we've now developed a relationship between the mentor and the student. The student is not some big, scary, hypothetical high school student to the mentor, and to the high school student, the mentor is like, oh, I could talk to this person. I could talk to this adult, even if they're not a parent or a teacher. And so from there, we say, okay, to the mentor, if the student's interested, say to the mentor, would you like to have the kid come for a single day as a shadow day? Okay. Kid goes, that's easy also for the mentor to say, sure, but this day, because this day I have a lot of meetings or whatever. And so the kid comes and shows up, and we structure with the kid. We support the kid in understanding what are some questions you should ask of this mentor and about this workplace. And how should you dress? And what, things, a lot of different things. And then after the shadow day is over, we can call the mentor up again and say, well, so you met Johnny, you met Jane, and Jane is, I'm sorry, I'm on a webinar, 1 second. And so Jane could set up that, so that at that point the internship could be set up. And because at that point we've developed that relationship with that mentor. I think that's me, I'm in an airport conference room, and I think that's the people telling me I need to get out.
So I'll just end on one quick, more researchy, wonky note there to David's point. So that's sort of how to scaffold the commitment to the original question. But I also would push folks to embrace the fact that research shows that students need webs of relationships in their lives, and the people in those webs play different roles. So I find mentor to be too monolithic a construct, and I know we need them to host internships in this model, but really thinking about what are the different types of adults who may have lesser or more commitments, and all of them being part of sort of a valuable web is where we think the future of More Network School could land. So that's a wonky, ethereal point to end on, but I think I just don't, sometimes the word mentor can zero in on just a one-to-one relationship versus one-to-many.
Cool.
I couldn't stop myself, I'm sorry.
It's fine. Thank you guys for a great webinar, and thank you to everybody that joined us today. So a couple questions came in really quickly about will you be able to view this webinar on the back end? Yes, it'll be recorded. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel, and I'll also be following up with everybody that attended with David and Julia's email for additional questions, anything that was burning and you couldn't get it out during this webinar, along with the video, so you'll have access to it. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Take care.
Safe flight, David.